Welcome to Thought Crime and Keto and Crime. Today I've got the final novel, and I use that term loosely, in the 𝗙𝗵𝗫 Standing in Holy Places series, The Renewed Earth. And it was written in 2011, again, about 200 pages. I read it on Kindle because none of these were available on Audible like his other series, the Times of Turmoil series that we read. Took me about three and a half hours to read this one because there was a lot of filler. There was a lot of like pages of just songs and both biblical and what I would assume was Book of Mormon scripture thrown in there. So if you take the actual filler out, we're looking at probably about 175 pages of actual material. So it didn't take me long to get through it, I will admit. Just like when I read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series, I skipped the elf song, or the dwarf songs, because it's just too much. So I just read the plot points. This one was kind of a letdown. I mean, we've been going through all kinds of build up to some climax, and yeah, this doesn't really deliver what I was hoping it would deliver. I'm not sure what my expectations were. It wasn't this, but we shall soon see. Anyway, without further ado, we'll get into it. But first, sorry, I have sinuses going on right now, sinuses and allergies. That's why I sound a lot different and why I may have to stop the recording because I'm sneezing. No, I do not have that which we cannot mention on YouTube because of Susan. I just have sinuses. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you to my wonderful patrons and my subscribers. Thanks to you, I'm able to purchase the things that I need for this channel. Thank you so much. And a shout out to everyone who watches, because that's the most important thing. If you are subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, I hope I earn your subscription today. And if you were subscribed and haven't checked in a while, go ahead and check, because there's been some unsubscribing shenanigans going on. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into The Renewed Earth. This book was written in 2011, as I said, about 175 pages of actual story. Everything else was kind of filler, and he actually has an entire pre-chapter where he talks about his other books. His biography, where we learned about his near-death experience, which I have read on the channel. I'll link it up there. A Julie Rose book. No, not Julie Rose, I apologize. The other near-death experience book he published for another author. I can't think of it, but I will pop the cover here because I will look it up. And so he's promoting his other books and the books that were, published by his company, Spring Creek Books. So that's kind of what that entire first chapter is. And then he starts in with a summation, because he has to tell us what happened in the previous book. And so he kind of resonates that 30% of the population of Earth has been killed by the plagues. The 4 plagues we've already seen, that Elias is in charge of the earth, and that his primary goal now is to kill the 2 apostles, that is Josh and Colton, that are in Jerusalem, and that they, along with the Jewish people that are now newly converting to Mormonism, are rushing to rebuild Solomon's temple on the Dome of the Rock. And so that's where the story left off, and of course he reapprises us of every single character's current state. by letting us know that Tad and Emma North still live in New Jerusalem with their children Charles and Leah. David has married Phyllis, which we saw in the last one. They now have a 2-year-old named Kiffin, and are living in student housing near BYU Zion. Both Davis and Phyllis are almost ready to graduate with their degrees. Doug and Becky, along with Mark and Michelle, are living in Springville, Utah, and have sort of started to rebuild it. Doug is still a member of the 144,000 high priests. And Josh, even though he's in Israel now as one of the apostles, she is still living with their children in remember the twins, near where they originally lived, their Guatemalan saints out in the suburbs of New Jerusalem, helping to minister to them. And the book opens with the 5th plague. We don't waste any time. Remember, in the first book we had, what was it? Horseflies, extreme, the drying up or the releasing of some strange mineral that made all the bodies of water on the earth turn red. Then we had extreme heat, and war, and the disease or pestilence that resulted from the horseflies. Those were our first 4 plagues, and that has wiped out 30% of the Earth's population. Now we're starting a 5th plague, which is a volcanic eruption off the coast of Europe. Everything's off the coast of Europe, Chad. And huge blasts of lava going everywhere. And we have John the Revelator, who is not only an apostle of Jesus, or a disciple, then an apostle, a saint, the Revelator, and an accomplished pilot. He is standing off Patmos, so this is off the coast of Italy or in Greece, in that area, watching this volcano erupt and laughing in glee. John's kind of a dick. And then we cut to Jerusalem. Yes, I still have the snowball. Jerusalem, where they have finished rebuilding Solomon's temple. And suddenly John the Revelator appears, and he's covered in soot and water, and I don't know what else, but he's covered with soot and water. And they ask him where he's been. He said, sorry for the mess. I've been in Iceland, or what's left of it, because evidently this volcano has taken out Iceland. And a huge volcanic ash has released into the atmosphere, and that will cause the 5th plague, because it's going to blot out the sun and cause a lot of respiratory problems for people that can't breathe, because, you know, breathing ash isn't exactly good for the lungs. And he says, but hopefully it'll hit the coalition more than anything. And he does tell them, you warn the people in North America. And I'm like, John, you're the one that's like, you know, immortal. You can telepath everywhere or just fly your little plane. Why don't you go and tell the people in North America and let them take care of where they are, because that's how being mortal works. Anyway, he's warning them that now the coalition army, remember, Elias has raised up, you know, over an army of millions by offering anybody, man or woman, over the age of 14 who's in reasonably good shape, an opportunity to join the army, and they will reward them with lands and possessions in whatever countries they conquer. They are marching towards Jerusalem right now to fulfill his wish of taking out the apostles and Jerusalem. So he's saying they've just crossed into Turkey, and they're almost at Syria. They'll be here very soon. But in the meantime, while you're preparing to fight them, you need to prepare to use your heavenly force powers to divert all this ash from Israel so that the people with respiratory problems here won't die. And I'm just going to go over here and drink. He didn't say that part, but that's just kind of how I took it, because he's the one with the power to go do all of this and warn this, and yet he's telling these two to just handle it. Handle it. He's a dick. Then we cut to Elias himself, camped in Syria, northern Syria, delighted by, absolutely just gleefully, like, giving himself 3 pats on the back because of all the soldiers he's managed to recruit. He's watching them set up their tents in the valley, and he just knows that he's going to win. He was able to get reinforcements in Damascus because that's his hometown, and he's prepared to take Israel by ground assault rather than resorting to missiles like he tried to by having the Libyans shoot that missile over at the Dome of the Rock. And then, of course, Satan appears and praises him and says, the time is near, make sure you do this and do this well. And they're both kind of happy that the missile attempt failed, because now they're going to gleefully be able to kill all these people. These are rotten dudes. And he has, of course, 200 million soldiers. That's what the book says. And he's ready to crush Israel, and he's promised them stuff he will, of course, never deliver. 𝗚ocks is a dick, too. A lot of dicks in this book. Written by a dick. Written for dicks. Enough said. So Chad then says that they are camped halfway between the Tigris and Euphrates River, and 𝗚lice is noting the symbolism of how it was the cradle of civilization and how we should enjoy this historic scenery because you'll always remember it before we destroy it. And then a coalition scientist, because he carries scientists with him everywhere he goes, comes up to him and says, this volcano erupted, it destroyed Iceland, and now there's all this ash. There's this volcanic ash just coming across all of Europe and Asia, and it could possibly give anybody with respiratory problems a really hard time. It could give anybody without respiratory problems a hard time, so it's going to be bad. And 𝗚lice just kind of starts thinking to himself. He says, well, we might as well just stay camped here, have everybody stay in their tent. At least we have water to drink, you know. He called to General Ramez, remember the Egyptian general who he's tapped to be his second in command, and told him to make sure all the troops were there within a few hours because he wants no stragglers because this is coming. And of course, the general does. Everybody's there, and then all of this ash starts to fall like snow. Then we cut back to Josh and Colton, and they're trying to figure out how can we keep, since John took off and left us holding the bag, how can we divert this huge cloud of ash from Israel and keep it from hurting a bunch of people? And right away, they entertain the notion they need an F5 tornado, and they can create one. But we would need a huge body of water for that. Well, we can go out and do that at the Tigris and the Euphrates. Or we can just, which, even though that's kind of dumb, and they say, oh no, but we can also do it out of the Mediterranean Sea, which is just over there. Colton says, but wouldn't it be too powerful? Wouldn't it cause just as much destruction as the ash? But they're like, well, no, but it will blow the ash away. So, using their force powers, they conjure up an F5 tornado, which does divert the majority of the ash from Jerusalem. Nowhere else, just Jerusalem. But, Chad, a tornado created over water is a hurricane or a cyclone. It's not a tornado. Plot hole, but anyway. So then we cut to Ben. Remember Ben Cohen, who is the allies of the apostles, evidently the lead Jewish person there, talking with his niece Rachel, who was evidently a highly decorated soldier in the Israeli army, because, you know, women did combat over in Israel. All people in Israel do mandatory 2-year military service. But she was in much longer, was kind of a heavily decorated soldier. But then she, resigned from the military to go care for her ailing parents in Greece, went to college there, and then when they died, she came back to Israel. Well, we got her whole backstory, and now she's there, but she doesn't quite trust the apostles. She doesn't know what to make of them. I agree with her. But since she's been, watching them perform all these miracles, and now they've just created a hurricane/tornado over the Mediterranean Sea, now she's beginning to see, well, maybe they are kind of magical and good. Maybe I should listen to them. So she starts talking with her uncle about what it means and what it does. But then we cut from that to the hurricane forming, and soon the eye of it is over Jerusalem. So the first part's gone through, blown all the ash away. And now the eye, which is the calm part, is over Jerusalem. And then we got to wait for the second part to go through. But there's more. This hurricane is now hitting the coalition army. And 𝗖𝗍 is screaming and threatening to have his meteorologist put to death. And again, the meteorologist is explaining that, like the tornado from the first book, this one there was no storm system that could have possibly created this, that he has no idea where this came from. And of course, 𝗖𝗍 goes, those meddling apostles. And he gritted his teeth and cussed like a sailor for about 2 minutes. And he says, we have to kill them. They can use the elements to destroy us. So General Ramez comes into his tent, latches the door, and then he says, let's discuss our options for dealing with these apostles, shall we? And while they're discussing, we cut back to Jerusalem, where the second part of the storm has now started to pass through, and it's starting to naturally weaken. But of course, Josh and Colton, being the jokesters that they are, command it to go and just stall over the coalition army and give them a real good drenching. Meanwhile, we never hear what 𝗖𝗍 and the general's plan is, because we cut to the storm a couple of days later, finally ending, and the army digging out and starting to march toward Jerusalem again. Meanwhile, we're taken back to the Kremlin, where some of the other coalition officers are, and we're seeing shown the devastation that has wrought Russia with the ash and all that. A lot of people died from respiratory problems. Even if they did, like me, I have asthma. If this was me, I'd be dead. And then there are people with, without respiratory problems that have also died from it. It has caused heart attacks. Anything you can think of, a lot of people have died, and Russia has gotten the brunt of it. And then, of course, because the ash made a lot of the water undrinkable, killed the animals, there's shortage of water, and nothing to eat. So Europe's in pretty bad shape. Then we cut back to New Jerusalem, where Tad and Emma are attending David and Phyllis's graduation from BYU Zion. And I just think it's funny that Chad had to throw in there that after Kiffin's birth, Phyllis took online classes like a proper Mormon wife, and concentrated on raising her daughter. And she had gotten a history degree. I don't want to get into a foray right now on useless degrees. I mean, I can't talk. I majored in psychology and English, minored in history and political science. My master's degree is in political science, so I am the authority on useless degrees. I've used it a few times. If you want to see my whole rant about going to college, it's here. But I think what's even funnier is he actually said that her degree was not only a history degree, which is worthless in of itself as far as getting a job. I mean, it's great to learn history, but there are lots of ways now you can learn history without having to go to college. That she had a concentration on the period between 2001 and the fall of the U.S. government, which, according to this book's timeline, we're in 2011. So she got an entire 4-year degree based on 10 years of history. My history minor, I concentrated in up to the 20th century. I majored in Western civilization, or minored in Western civilization, and then went into U.S. history and studied the colonial, the antebellum, Civil War years, just after the Civil War, up to the turn of the 20th century, in the 1900s. And that was a lot. That was an adequate amount to cover in 4 years. That's a couple of hundred years of history. She got hers in 10 years, on a period of 10 years. Chad. Whereas David got his degree in engineering. So right away, he's kind of, in my opinion, sticking a knife into the fact Phyllis even has a degree. Anyway, we cut to a scene of Emma and Tad resting at home, talking about the graduation, their granddaughter, kind of relaying, what happened to them during the first 4 plagues, that they had plenty of food, and that they were so lucky that they were warned by the people in Europe of what was coming, that to survive the 5th plague, they had respirators and gas masks and were able to kind of hole up their residents to keep the ash out. And they had survived that plague as well. So, yay. And then we cut, with much enthusiasm, to another part of the Milky Way galaxy. That is exactly what Chad says. That's the verbiage, verbatim. Milky Way, another part of the Milky Way galaxy. So we're in outer space, and we get to Susanna, who is a lifetime friend from many lives ago of Emma. Emma doesn't know it yet. And she is in this world, because in the Mormon religion, they talk about everybody having their own planet. So she's on this planet, and she's thinking about how she is the first member of her family to transcend, and that she had been a good person on Earth, but there was no one on Earth greater than Emma Dalton, because they grew up together several times, and she knows what a great person Emma is and what a great role she's going to play in the upcoming reign of Christ. She said they've known each other for eons, and they've always been united in their belief in their Heavenly Father's plan. But then she starts thinking about her little brother Enoch, who, at first I was like, is this the Enoch that is the Book of Enoch, which is one of the highly criticized, argued about non-canonic gospels, that is based on the person in the Bible that didn't die and walked into heaven. So I was wondering, is this that Enoch? Turns out it is. So Emma and Susanna's related to Enoch, and Emma used to hang out with Enoch in their previous lives. And then, so she admits that Emma will become transcendent very soon and be kind of in between mortal and immortal, but she's worried about Tad. And then we cut back. I don't know what that interlude was all about, but then I guess just to tell that Emma is special. So we cut back to Emma, and she's laying in bed wondering why she has this strange feeling. Yeah, I wonder why. So as if some idiot was writing a book, Emma suddenly remembers that, oh, she's a transcendent being, and her and Tad have been together for eons, because this was who they decided to link for a lifetime together, but she was still worried about him because she was about to transcend what would happen to him. She says, I need to talk to my eldest brother Jesus about it. So Susanna related to Enoch, but Emma's related to the man himself, Jesus. So both her and Tad have this out-of-body experience where they fly through the veil and actually talk to Jesus at a temple gate somewhere out in the Milky Way galaxy. Jesus hugs them and tells them, you're going to be okay. This is going to be hard, but you're both going to live on Earth for many, many, many years during my reign, and then you're both going to die and resurrect and come back transcendent. So don't worry. Stay the course. I'll be back on Earth soon. And then he sends them back. And they wake up, and I'm like, that was a hell of a trip. Back on Earth, back in Springville, Utah, we catch up with Doug Dalton as he's driving a solar-powered truck along what's left of Interstate 80 in Northern California. So he's going from Utah to California in this solar-powered truck. How is that possible with ash covering the sun? Plot hole. But anyway, he's in this truck powered by mythical, you know, I know the solar panels work even when it's cloudy, but how do they work when heavenly volcanic ash clouds out the sun? I don't think we've tested that theory. But anyway, he and Jonas Ferguson are on their way to check all the temples in California because they're very worried about the people in California. We all. And sorry, I couldn't resist. I love my California peeps. But in the past month, I guess the first presidency of the Mormon Temple and the Prophet have really worried that the California people may not be ready for the second coming, and he would like to bring everybody back towards the middle of the country. So they are out looking for those people. And their first stop, though, had been Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, where they gathered a few dozen saints and sent them to Rexburg, which was the closest city of light. Remember that list of cities, Rexburg, Springville, Orem, Salt Lake City, Provo, all those cities that were listed by the prophetess that needed to be revitalized to become a city of light. So they're going around gathering up all the saints that are still living on their own, probably very happy living on their own, but that doesn't matter. It's all about Chad. So they send those people in British Columbia to Rex. What about the rest of Canada? It's a lot of people in Canada. The people in the Yukon don't matter. But anyway, so he sends them to Rexburg, and now they traveled through Washington, Oregon, and found them all, sent them all to Idaho. And then they start thinking about the Lincoln Park boys. Every time I hear that, I either think of Children of the Corn or the band Lincoln Park. I know Lincoln and Lincoln have nothing to do with each other, but I still think of that. So anyway, they're thinking about them and how they've been a big help in this whole bring back in the saints. So evidently they have converted all of them. They didn't kill everybody, so that's good. And evidently anybody living outside these cities is still living very primitively. No electricity, no running water, having to hunt and fish and all that to survive. So they're very, very excited to hear that there's actual electricity and running water. So most of the time no one argues when they send them on their way. So they call it sending the lost sheep back to Zion. Then we cut back to Israel to a military briefing with the Israeli army. Apostles Colton and Josh are there along with Ben. It's amazing the security clearance these people have. Anyway, this Israeli general is briefing the men on how the hurricane and the ash and everything caused them to lose about a few million of their men, but they received reinforcements from Iran, and that they're back to nearly 200 million soldiers and still coming. And he says they're going to swarm over us like locusts. We don't have near the numbers nor the weaponry to shoot that off. We could shoot every missile we had at them, and they'll just keep coming. That's an insane amount of men. So Josh and Colton decide the best they can do is slow them down a little bit by causing plague number 6, which is the drying up of rivers and lakes on the earth. So they cause an earthquake that essentially dries up the Tigris and Euphrates River, as well as all other bodies of water in that general area, and basically destroy a few of them with the earthquake, but leave them without water. Now, this is a plot hole. Major plot hole. Plot hole. Because if they got all this magical power, why can't they just zap the coalition army out of existence? Or better yet, how about do the Jedi mind trick and convince them that what they're doing is wrong and send them back to their homes? Why? It seems that everything they've done, all this magical force power they have, is just being able to cause inconveniences to the coalition army. Without wreaking real damage, they're just causing inconveniences. Not a very good force power. Chad, you need to watch some more Star Wars, buddy. Do they allow you to watch that in the clink? Probably not. I hope you're busting rocks somewhere. So, we cut to the army where the general and 𝗖𝗍 are standing out there where the Euphrates River used to be, and at watching their troops dig themselves out of the earthquake damage, and they notice that now the river, instead of a body of water in which they were going to go across on boats, it's now a 400-mile patch of mud in which they cannot make across because this mud is like quicksand if they try to walk across it. So they've been delayed by a few days. They say their only choice now is to go further north and try to find a bridge or something that wasn't destroyed so that 200 million people can walk across it. There are so many plot holes in here. This book should be called The Art of Swiss Cheese because there's holes all over the place. But anyway, that's the grand plan. And then we get this huge, again, all the apostles could do was cause a minor inconvenience. They had to go some miles out of their way. Anyway, then we cut back to General Ramirez thinking back to what he's done in his past, and we see he's been an Islamic extremist his whole life. He's participated in so many coups and rebellions, and he hates Israel, he hates the USA, and he's more than happy to be helping 𝗖𝗍. So that's his origin story. And then we cut back to the present where they're heading north trying to find a way to get across the Tigris and the Euphrates. And then a few hours later, a scout comes back telling them, oh, we've located a bridge 30 miles away so that we can all cross on that. 200 million people going to walk across a single solitary wooden bridge. Okay, that's going to take a while. So now we see that the apostles' force power only managed to really do a most minor inconvenience to the army. They can conjure up earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes, but they can't completely wipe out this army. They can only make them have to go a bit out of their way before they get to it. Chad makes my points for me. It's so easy here. So, we cut back where the Jewish people, they're going ahead with their dedication of the new temple. And so it's this huge pomp and ceremony kind of thing going on. John the Baptist, John the Revelator, the Apostle Andrew, who's John the Revelator's brother, and Zechariah appear to Josh and Colton during the ceremony and tell them that the time of the invasion, the time of the second coming of Christ is near. And so you know John the Baptist, you know John the Revelator, his brother Andrew, the disciple, apostle, and then Zechariah. Remember Zechariah, the little short like tax collector that climbed up into the tree to better see Jesus? Yeah, him. He's there. And so they appear and tell them the time is short. And so that even though this dedication is wonderful and it had to be fulfilled for the prophecy to be fulfilled, you better prepare because the invasion's coming. Again, John's a dick. And then we cut back to the camp after 200 million people had crossed a little monkey bridge somewhere. And they're camped, and so Satan himself now appears to 𝗖𝗍 and is screaming at him about how the Jews dedicated their temple, they've developed more spiritual power, these apostles are growing more powerful by the day, you've got to stop them, you've got to do something. And of course there's this huge argument where 𝗖𝗍 goes, look, I have battled the elements, ash, a volcanic eruption, respiratory problems, hurricanes, tornadoes, dried up water, earthquakes, walking my entire army off a bridge that's not big enough for a Toyota, and now you want to bitch at me because they dedicated a temple. He and Satan get into a fist fight, and Satan kicks his butt, and I think that's the most beautiful part of the whole thing. And then Satan puts this like chokehold on him, like with nothing but like will. And so it's like Darth Vader, you know, choking people with his Dark Force Sith powers. And literally, Elias begs for mercy, and Satan tells him, if you don't conquer them tomorrow, I'm going to replace you. So it's like Donald Trump saying, you're fired if you don't do this for me by tomorrow. And then Satan disappears. That's Chad for you. So now we cut back to Jerusalem, and an urgent message has arrived from Israeli spies saying that the coalition army was progressing across Syria at lightning speed, and that they were already at Damascus, and they were almost at Jerusalem. So they better hurry and get their crap together. So the Israeli leaders send out a cry for anyone within a 100-mile radius that can get there, that's over the age of 18, so they have a cutoff point, to come and sign up for the Israeli army to re-enlist, because they need all hands on deck to fight this army. Now listen, I realize that they're trying to be good here by only saying 18, but if your nation's about to be conquered, I'd say anybody that can hold a gun might be a good person to recruit, whether they're 16 or 85. If they can hold and aim a weapon and not hurt anybody on your side, I'd say you probably need to recruit them in. But that's just me. So all these people, a few 100,000 converge, 500,000 strong, and they actually dress them in army fatigues. Where did they get all those uniforms? And they gave them each a semi-automatic weapon with plenty of ammunition. Can the Israeli army don't they have automatic weapons? You don't need to mess around with semi-automatic, which you have to rechamber a lot more often than you do an automatic. They don't have automatic weapons. Plot hole. So anyway, they suit them all up. They give them semi-automatic weapons with plenty of ammunition, and they send them out marching towards the Valley of Megiddo, which, if you have listened to any evangelical anything talk about the end of the world, supposedly the Battle of Armageddon, which is that final battle between good and evil, is going to take place at the Valley of Megiddo. So they are sending them marching toward the Valley of Megiddo, where the coalition army is marching from the Syrian side. And that's where I'm going to end part 1 of the final book in this series for 𝗙𝗵𝗃. Don't worry, it is my plan to finish this one in 2 parts. I'm not going to make you wait 3 parts. I'm going to finish it in 2. That is my goal. Anyway, with that being said, I will see you very soon. Pardon me. Keto and crime. Until next time. Keto and crime.